everybody. I'm Miss Irene with the Collier County Library, and this is
Andrew.
He's also with the Collier County Library, and today we're going to be discussing one of our now new favorite books.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely a great book. It's called The Light Pirate by Brooks-Dalton. Can we see it?
New release.
New release. It came out in December, and this is her second novel. Her first novel was Goodnight Midnight, and it actually became a Netflix movie with George Clooney.
That's right.
So she has written a novel before, but this one is definitely different. It's different than anything I've ever really read before. Her background is as a writer. She has her writing BA. So that's pretty much what she's been doing her whole life. She also wrote a book about motorcycles as a memoir, which I think would be interesting. So I think everything she writes is just a little different than everything else. So I'm going to give you a quick summary of the book. This book is set in Florida, and we basically have a family that is a stepmother, a father, and two boys, and they're preparing for Hurricane Wanda to come. And this storm is big. But the father is a lineman, and he basically says, don't worry about it, the storm's fine, we're going to prepare.
We don't evacuate.
We don't evacuate.
No, we're going to be okay.
And there are going to be spoilers in this discussion, so just be prepared.
Yes, not spoiler free. Be prepared for that.
So basically, in this terrible first chapter, we lose one of the boys, and Wanda's mom, who is the mother, she
Frida.
gives birth, Frida, she gives birth to Wanda, and Wanda is basically the central character of the story, and it follows her life throughout after this experience. So that's the beginning of the book, that Florida is definitely in, the tides are coming in, the storms are coming in, they're taking over, and really, are we evacuating? And should you evacuate is the question kind of throughout this whole book.
Yeah, definitely. I think that comes up in pretty much every part, at least the first three parts of the book. The last part is, I think, only like 5 to 10 pages. It's really short. But they're constantly wondering if it's time to leave, whether it's a storm, whether governments are shutting down, local governments or the federal governments. They're constantly wondering whether it's time to leave or not, which I think is really interesting. Have you ever evacuated during a storm?
No, I've always stayed.
Yeah, I've never evacuated either. I think I was born and raised in Florida, so I've never really felt like the need. I think a lot probably like the characters, especially the male characters in the first part of this book, is like, why would you leave? I mean, you also don't know, the storm could always shift, so you never know.
Yeah, he was under the impression they weren't going to be in the eye, that she was basically worrying because she was pregnant and she was a nervous Nelly, kind of along the lines. And it ended up proving that the storm came right at them. And one of the unique things is when he comes back and finds, is it Frida?
Frida.
Frida. She's given birth to Wanda and she's not doing well. And she insists that they name the baby Wanda after the storm.
Correct.
Which I found very strange. Because why would you want to remember this horrible day and be named after it? And the town kind of looked at her funny because she was a remembrance of a time that was not pleasant.
Yeah, I think characters mentioned that they reminded her of the bad times, or like that she was kind of like the origin of all the bad things that happened to the city or the town of Rudder, where the story is set.
So overall, I always like to start with our overall opinions, and we can be completely different. What was your impression of the book? On a Goodreads scale of 1 to 5, what would you give it?
I would probably give it like a 4 to a 4.5. That's where I'm at. What about you?
I really liked the book. I liked the writing, and it was very unique, so I would probably give it a solid 4. Because there were some parts in there that got to me where I felt like I had to skim. So there was some parts where she got a little monotonous about, but then again, I'm from Florida, so when she's talking about the Everglades and she's talking about the birds and everything else that's in Florida, I'm very familiar with it, so maybe it isn't as much of an interest to me as it would be to somebody else. So I felt like I had to skim. It had a crawdads feel to it when she was kind of talking about the nature. But it was definitely a solid book to read, and something completely different. I would recommend it. Go ahead, you do question number 2.
Sure. Do you think Kirby was wrong to continue to stay in Rudder after Wanda was born. What do you think?
Kirby was a lineman, and he had a solid job with a solid pay. And I think he felt like, we kind of just felt like after Anne just hit was, oh, it was the storm of the century, would it happen again? So, do I think he should have taken Wanda out of Rudder? I'm kind of torn there. I kind of understand where he was coming from. I would say I don't think he was wrong, because I think he was also married to the memories there. That's where his kids were. That's where the memories of his children were. That's where Phyllis, who actually becomes kind of like a babysitter to Wanda, is. And he's got some security in that and somebody to take care of her. But at the same time, you could take the other side too. What do you think?
I think it's a hard question for me to answer personally, because I really dislike the character of Kirby, and so I didn't really agree with a lot of his choices in the story. I found him to be kind of annoying. He seemed like he was really incapable of making decisions, whether it was like romantic decisions later in the book, or whether it was decisions on like parenting or love or marriage. I feel like he was kind of just like very complacent, even in work. And he like would have these moments or these glimpses of like, well, maybe I should be a better husband, or maybe I should be a better father. Like, I want to be a better father. And then like something immediately would happen, and he'd be like, I'm angry, and I'm just gonna storm out, or I don't know. I had a hard time with his character. So it's hard to say. I don't know if he wasn't really great at making choices. So he did what he did, and I don't really know if I could place like a judgment call on it. But I think it was great for the story that they stayed.
Yeah, and he stayed in Rudder. You know, to this point, we're sitting there, we're staying. He's got a secure job. He's got a babysitter. He's got everything that he needs to keep going.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Lucas. Lucas was the son that made it. So, do you want to tell a little bit about that part of the storyline with the brothers?
Sure. So
Philip,
for short, and Lucas are Kirby's two sons from his first marriage. And they don't live with Kirby and Frida full time. They are only staying there for the summer, I believe. And that is coincidentally when this Hurricane Wanda is hitting. And Lucas is the kind of like bullying, obnoxious older brother who makes some questionable decisions in the first part of the book. And as a result of those decisions, his younger brother, Flip, ultimately dies. Spoilers, first part of the book, it's like the first 50 or so pages, I think, maybe the first 100, so it's not too big of a spoiler. So that's how their origin of in the story kind of plays out. But what was the question?
So do you think he made the right decision? So later on in this story, he's responsible for Wanda. Phyllis is taking care of Wanda. And Lucas is responsible now for Wanda. And did he make the decision, this is kind of like the same question, but from Lucas, for Wanda to stay with Phyllis in Rudder, or should he have taken her with him to his college experience and to out of town to a different place?
It's a really hard question because, right, in the story, he actually leaves her with Phyllis twice, right? So he leaves her to go to UC Berkeley, I think that's the school he goes to in California, when he is like 21 or 22, I think. And then he also comes back later once things out in the world have gotten worse as a result of climate change and kind of more dystopian. And then he comes back for a visit for like a month, and then he ultimately leaves her again. So I'm not sure. I think that both times were probably the right choice. Like, I couldn't imagine being like I was always a younger brother, but I couldn't imagine being an older brother at age 22 and taking care of a 10-year-old. Like, I don't know about you, I just could not. I don't think I could take that on while simultaneously going to college. And I think that in the second part, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that he was in any place? The way he's described doesn't sound like he was really in any kind of condition or place to be like...
To be able to take her on?
Yeah, even when she was like 16, I think, at that point. I think that's where she was. So he would have been like almost 30. And
I think it would have been such an upset to Wanda because she had lived her whole life in Rudder.
And had grown so attached to Phyllis at that point.
And at this point, Phyllis is like her surrogate mother. who she never really knew. And, you know, she's teaching her botany, she's teaching her sciences, survival skills, all these things that are really important in this new environment. And so I feel like, I think he made the right decision.
Both times.
But I think it was a very difficult decision to make, because he said to her when he left, I don't know if I'll ever be able to come back and see you again. And he didn't. He was never able to make it back to Rudder again, because there wasn't transportation, there wasn't places to get there. There was no way to brave the wild and even find them, or to know where they would be in Rudder, because...
The second time.
Yeah.
Right, because the cell towers, I think, by that point were down, and he was, like, communicating by CB radio, or they were. But also, to that last point, though, is I think, if I recall correctly, both times, I think Phyllis talked him out of it. Maybe the first time she did, actually. I think she was kind of like, you need to go to college, like, this is what your father would have wanted you to do. And I think the second time, maybe she changed her tune a little bit. It was like, you should stay here, right?
Right. She wanted him to stay with them, but she didn't want him to take Wanda.
Yeah.
She was incredibly attached to Wanda.
Absolutely. At that point, for sure.
So question number 4, you want to read it for us?
Awesome. Let's do this. In the face of the world's problems, Kirby and Frida grapple with the idea of bringing a new child into the world. Phyllis is intentional about not wanting to become a mother. Today, some couples are choosing not to have children in the name of environmental responsibility. Where do you fall in this debate? So we've talked about this a little bit earlier off camera, but I want to hear from you and what you thought about this.
So I think it's very interesting for them to take it and say, for environmental reasons, people aren't having children. We talked a little bit about this. I think it's not so much for the environment as it is for financials. I think it's very expensive to have children. But they did grapple with bringing somebody into this world because they were in a different world than we're in. I mean, if I was in the world where hurricanes were hitting, 4 to 5 times a year, and they were really, disastrous, and we were completely losing our electrical grid on a regular basis, and we were in that type of environment, I don't know that I would want to bring or raise a child in that environment either. I think it would have been a difficult decision to make.
It's hard though too, because in this story, it doesn't really give us an exact time for setting, right? For setting, we have place and time. We have the place for sure is Florida, but I don't think it ever tells us like an exact date. We get clues that they have cell phones, so we know that it's kind of modern times, but you get the idea that it's maybe like 10 to 15 to 20 years in the future. That was my perception of it, right? Like at this point, the waters have already started like consuming houses, and like there's this place called the Edge of Rudder, which is like where the beach and the ocean have kind of like started taking over the streets, and so like infrastructure, things are starting to fall apart and crumble at this point. So I think that it would be so difficult to want to have kids in this world. Definitely different than it is right now. I mean, I can understand the sentiment of not wanting to have kids right now, but in this world in particular, I think it would be challenging because you're literally watching like nature destroy these man-made structures, and it's like, why would you want to bring a child into that? I couldn't imagine.
Well, and I think one of the key themes of the book was, especially with Kirby, who, like you said, could not make a decision, was he knew it was coming, he just didn't think it was going to come so soon. So maybe some of the decisions were, okay, well, this is in the future. We all know it's coming in the future, but we didn't think the future is now. And if somebody was to tell me right now a hurricane's going to hit Naples and wipe it completely off the map, I would say that's not going to happen. Or that's way in the future. It's not something I have to worry about. So in some ways, but for them, they really were experiencing it. They had gone through, this is the piece we didn't talk about, Frida lost her mother to a hurricane.
The year before Hurricane Wanda hit, correct?
I think it was Poppy or something like that.
Yeah. Hurricane Poppy in Puerto Rico. I think they were in San Juan. She was visiting her mother. And
then she met him because he was a lineman, basically doing the infrastructure in Puerto Rico after that hurricane. So it was definitely an interesting place to be and make a decision.
Yeah, I do remember that. He even does say, like, it happened there, which is something I feel like I hear all the time in the news. Even it's like it happened there, but I never thought it could happen here, which I thought is so interesting because I think that was probably something that we heard quite a bit during Hurricane Ian.
Absolutely.
In previous hurricanes as well. I mean, you see this kind of like natural destruction in these images and these videos, and you're like, oh, it seems so far away and removed, and like the fallout from what those storms can cause and what they inflict on people, and it seems so far away. And I think he does mention that, like in Puerto Rico, sure, I could see the infrastructure crumbling and people not having cell service, and the government not being as effective there, but he didn't see it happening in his own backyard, which I think was pretty alarming.
So I think they went ahead with it, and they kind of jumped into, I mean, they didn't know each other very well. They really jumped in because they were having Wanda. You know, and he got married, and in the beginning it was just him and Frida, and they were painting the house and prepping, and then the boys came, and that changed the dynamic. And then this hurricane comes and really changes the dynamic. The novel unfolds in 4 parts, which I find beautiful. I love the way that they did this in the story. It's called Power, Water, Light, and Time. How does the book's unique structure mirror Wanda's journey from childhood to death? So the power, the water, the light, and time, as you go through, the power in the very beginning is the power grid. That's how I feel that power was. It was in an environment where there still was power, there was still a power grid there was still some type of unnatural civilization still existing. And then we get to the point of the water. The water pretty much overtook it. Everything. I mean, there was nothing left. The light was Wanda. She was supernatural. She was able to bring about light. As well as she had to become nocturnal. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
In the book,
the third part, which was light, yes.
Which was light. It was so hot during the day, scorching hot. They would sleep during the day, and they would forage for food at night.
Because it was too dangerous. The heat, the temperatures rose, and they were too high for
and they would
function outside.
Absolutely dehydrate and have sun exhaustion. And then time at the very end is very short. It's like you said, maybe 5 pages.
Yeah, super short.
And it kind of is the epilogue of what happens to Wanda. So I do think it mirrors her journey from childhood to death. I think each of those chapters follow the path that happened until the very end of the book, when Wanda finally passes away.
I really enjoyed it, but I feel like we've mentioned this off camera, but we've talked about how this book would be a good movie or like maybe a good miniseries or a good series. What do you think? Right?
I absolutely think so.
I think it would be great too, but I would like to see less emphasis, I think, on part 1. I think we could maybe wrap that. Like if this was a series, I would like to see less of part 1. I think maybe because the characters during that part I didn't really enjoy.
But she did a good job with the characters because she really made you not like them.
Yeah. I did like part 2, which was Water, which follows Wanda, I think, around the age of 10.
Yep, up to 16, pretty much.
Is it 16?
Maybe even older.
I don't remember. I thought 16 was part... Oh, no, yeah, you're right. It's like 10, and then near the end, it's age 16, and then part 3, I feel like we don't really get a good... Is it... Like she's like 26, almost 30, maybe?
It's almost on purpose. They basically do away with time. They do away with dates. They do away with everything because it's just you waking up and you're going to sleep, and you're waking up and you're going to sleep, and the sense of having a year just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
There was no time.
Yeah. It seems like part 1, which is like 100 pages almost, takes place kind of in modern times where we are right now, and then part 2 would be like 10 years in the future maybe, and then part 3 would be like 30 years in the future. I think I'm more interested honestly in like Wanda's childhood and her teenage years, like part 3, when especially part 3 is when society has basically collapsed entirely. Like there's no more government structures, there's no electricity, people are hunting and foraging for their food. I think that is like my favorite part of the story. I'd like to see more. I think you could do a lot of interesting things with like world building and that just whole universe. how people survive. So I enjoyed the 4 parts of the novel, but I wish that some parts were maybe a little bit shorter and other parts were
more
a bit,
depth.
yeah, exactly.
In your own life, how do you think about and prepare for changing landscapes and weather? How did the author's depiction of the events make you think about our planet's future? Well, I have to tell you, reading this book was a little bit shocking. It definitely put me in a different perspective of a hurricane and what it could do. It also was very shocking to me because recently we've had good friends who went through Ian who literally lost their entire homes. And were on their roofs surviving during the event because the waters were so high. And that was right here in Naples.
Yeah.
And I feel like that wasn't that long ago, and it really wasn't. But
no, like 6 months ago.
But
wow.
We are rebuilt, and nobody really talks about it, and we've moved on from it. It hasn't. It's like we didn't. Maybe we're a little bit of Kirby-esque in our thinking. I don't know.
Sure.
Because have I really done something different and changed about, or in preparation for a hurricane? Not really.
No, but I mean, even this morning when we were talking about it, because I just finished the book last night, and I came in and we were talking about it, and I mean, I was like, if anything, it's inspired me to like maybe want to learn more survivor skills, and
right.
like maybe grow my own food. There's a character in the book that we've already mentioned, Phyllis, who is like a scientist and a survivalist, and is really what helps allow Wanda to survive in this story. I mean, without Phyllis, I don't know if even yeah. I mean, so she's incredible, and I mean that I think inspired me. She's a very inspirational figure, and I would like to maybe change the way I approach natural disasters, or maybe just the future in general as a result of that. I
actually thought about buying one of those things that you can make your water clean. Like people use them when they're camping, but I'm like, maybe I need one of these, and maybe I need a Swiss Army knife. I don't know. There's like silly things out there, but I'm like, I definitely am underprepared in the sense of like I only have an electronic can opener. That's probably not good.
Yeah, you should definitely get
like, a manual can opener.
That's a good idea.
I mean, I'm going silly with this, but even
no,
if not, it's things you think about, like basic. We are spoiled.
I mean, in the last part of the book, it's only like 5 to 10 pages long, but they have that funny moment where society has completely collapsed, and it's like tribal, and people are like basically living outside, or maybe in man-made communities that are like not super well structured and safe. But at one point, Wanda and another character are talking, and they're like, "Do you remember taps? Like, do you remember faucets? Like,
yes.
You just like turn like you didn't have to go out and like find fresh water. You didn't have to like row a boat and source this thing. You could just go walk to your kitchen and like turn a thing." And they're joking about like, what was this thing? What was it called? And I mean, we take so many of those things for granted, right? I mean, knives or can openers or fresh water.
Absolutely.
So it definitely gives you a different perspective on all of those things.
I am not keeping up. Number 7. Okay. What was the significance of the light Wanda had when she touched the water? So.
Wait, before we talk about this.
Yes.
You did mention genre.
Yes.
I think before we talk about this question, we should talk about genre. So
yes.
What do you think? What's the genre here?
It's apocalyptic for sure, and also mystical.
Yeah. I would agree. I think the best way I would describe it was probably like, I described it as magical realism. And another one of our coworkers in the library also read it and was like, "But is it magical?" And like, we had this kind of discussion about it this morning. And I don't know. I still think it's pretty magical, especially the other characters. As society has collapsed, these people develop new skills or abilities, I guess. And so I don't know. But I would definitely classify it kind of as magical, maybe a little supernatural. I don't really know. Definitely not scientific though, because Phyllis considers herself a scientist, and she is. And she even like says that she struggles with this power, right? Like Wanda can emit light from her body and over water, and so I think that's interesting. She's like, she can't explain it. She like wants to explain it in scientific means, but she just doesn't have like the language or the tools to express what Wanda's power is.
And I kind of went the opposite way and said maybe it's not magical. Maybe it's us evolving in this new society where we are evolving to have traits that are going to be better prepare us to be a survivalist. Because it does talk at the end of the book that there's more than one, like somebody who can hear more, so they could actually hear the fish, and they could see, and so they were able to catch the fish, and she could emit light in the water, and it was just, and it was passed on. The mystical part is that
the very end.
At the very end, it's passed on to another girl.
Yeah.
And so the question is was it passed on, or did she also have the gene?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really up to interpretation.
Yes.
Definitely. But I enjoyed it either way.
Yes, I liked that part of the book. All right, question 8. As the novel progresses, we see examples of both the danger and the necessity other people pose to Wanda. What are your thoughts on this conundrum? How would you navigate weariness and trust in such a brutal world? So, putting this into perspective, Wanda will go days, months. I mean, there isn't really time, but without seeing anybody.
Yeah, in part 3, correct? Right, when they're left to fend for themselves. It's just her and Phyllis, and then it's like told in flashbacks, right?
Yes.
So it's like told in her time after Phyllis, and then also when she is with Phyllis. But in both cases, I think they don't really see other people.
No, and so the thought was, Phyllis always told her, people aren't good, and you need to be wary of people. And her first encounter really kind of reinforces that. Because we have 2 men that come in, and basically they follow them back with their canoe and realize that they have hoarded food because they have been survivalists and they want to take their food. And we won't get into what happens at that point, but it definitely is a horrible experience for Wanda.
But even before that, I mean, that is part of what shapes Wanda's trauma and her inability to trust other people. But also, like, in the very first part, almost like the first scene that we meet Wanda as a child, it's revealed that she has issues trusting people. Because there's a scene, I think she's 10 years old, where she has gone on this kind of adventure. She's broken the rules. She wants to go see the Edge, which is where the ocean has kind of overtaken the land at this point. And she's pushed underwater and like almost drowned by another child.
They're bullying her.
Yeah, I think that's like the first big piece of that, like, shows us why Wanda has difficulty trusting people. But in the second encounter as well, that one was, we can't spoil that one, right?
Right, we can't spoil that one.
Let's not spoil that one. But that was, yeah, she has trouble trusting people, and then it's shown later in part 3 as well after Phyllis. And right, she needs, who does she need? I called her Bear Dog earlier.
Yes, it was Bird Dog.
Bird Dog.
And it's actually one of the girls that bullied her when she was younger.
Yeah, Bird Dog. I love that name.
She is very weary because Bird Dog's in a community. She's with a bunch of other survivalists. And in time, Wanda overcomes her fears because she misses, there's like an innate part of her that misses being around other people deep inside.
Yeah, it's like her inner voice. I just found it. It says her inner voice tells her, "Help these people. Let them help you back," which is something that she really, really struggles with throughout the book. But I think that it's handled in such a beautiful way.
And she really learns to just listen to that that inner voice throughout the book and find ways to grow. I mean, and she's an amazing character. Yeah. I absolutely love her.
No, she's definitely my favorite character right after Phyllis, probably. I had a hard time with the first part of the book because of just really disliking her parents and one of her brothers. But half of those characters die and the problem solves itself. So Wanda was definitely the best character. I enjoyed all of her parts the most.
So that's the end of our questions. In follow-up, I just want to say this book is something that it's something you've never had before. It's something I don't think you've ever read before. I'd give it a try.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I don't think I would ever have picked this up. I went into it knowing very little. Irene suggested this book about like 3 months ago when we first got into the planning stages of this, and I was like, I think I looked up a review on Amazon and I was like, sure, why not? I'll give it a try. And started reading it maybe 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and I couldn't put it down. It was so good. I mean, we're in our office even.
Yes, chatting about it.
There's another person who read it. There's another person who's currently reading it. I think like by the end of this week, half of the people in the office are going to have read it. So I think that you guys should all be reading this book too. I think that's my recommendation.
So if you want to join us for a book discussion, we do a Zoom discussion. So you can email me at irenenn.johnson@colliercountyflorida or fl.gov, or you can sign up at collierlibrary.org/events and then find our book discussion. It is March 28th at 2 p.m. And basically we do it over Zoom and we have a really good time. Right now I think we have 5 or 6 people signed up, but we would love to have more.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Have a great day.